You keep replaying it in your head, not the big moments, not the arguments or the goodbyes. It's the small ones. The way he'd look past you instead of at you. The way his voice would flatten when you needed it to be warm. The way a room could feel emptier with him in it than it ever did when you were alone. Nobody warns you about this kind of loneliness, the kind that happens inside a relationship. You were sitting right next to him, and you still felt like you were reaching across an ocean just to be seen. For a long time, you told yourself it was you. Maybe you needed too much. Maybe you were too sensitive, too aware, too something. You shrunk your needs down to fit into the small space he gave you. And you called that love because it was the only version of love he knew how to offer. But here's what you're starting to understand now. In the quiet after it's over, his absence was never about your worth. It was never a measurement of how much you deserved to be loved. It was a reflection of what he was capable of giving, and nothing more. Think back to the signs. Not the dramatic ones. The quiet ones. The way he'd change the subject when things got emotionally real. The way he'd be physically present but somewhere else entirely. Scrolling, distracted, checked out. The way conversations about your feelings always seemed to circle back to his. You noticed. Some part of you always noticed. But you learned to talk yourself out of it. Because naming it meant facing something you weren't ready to face. That the person you loved didn't know how to meet you where you were. This is the part no one tells you. Emotional absence doesn't always look like neglect. Sometimes it looks like someone who says the right words, but never quite backs them up with presence. Someone who shows up for the photo, but disappears the moment real intimacy is required. Someone who can talk about the future, but flinches at real vulnerability in the present. You weren't imagining it. You weren't being dramatic. You were sensing a gap that was actually there. And you spent your energy trying to close a distance that was never yours to close. Let's talk about what that does to a person over time. When you spend months, maybe years, reaching for someone who keeps stepping just out of reach, you start to adjust your entire nervous system around the absence. You become hyper-aware of his moods. You get good at reading silence. You develop a radar for distance because you've had so much practice detecting it. And slowly, without even noticing, you start to shrink. You stop bringing up the things that matter to you because you're tired of watching his eyes glaze over. You stop asking for reassurance because asking felt like begging, and begging felt unbearable. You start managing your own needs quietly, alone, so you don't have to face the disappointment of asking and not receiving. This is what emotional unavailability does. It doesn't announce itself. It teaches you, slowly, that wanting closeness is somehow too much. And that lesson is one of the hardest things to unlearn. Because it wasn't true. It was never true. Wanting to be truly known by the person you love is not too much. It is the most human thing there is. Here's something worth sitting with. Some people are simply not equipped to offer real emotional presence, no matter how much they may care about you in their own way. That doesn't make you unlovable. It means you were standing in front of a door that was never going to open, no matter how gently or how long you knocked. You might be asking yourself now, how did I miss it for so long? But you didn't miss it. You survived it. You adapted to someone who couldn't meet you. And you did it because some part of you was still hoping he'd eventually show up the way you needed him to. That hope wasn't weakness. It was love, given to someone who didn't know how to receive it fully. The turning point isn't when he changes. For most people, he doesn't. The turning point is when you stop asking why he couldn't be present and start asking what it will take for you to feel safe again in your own presence. Because that's where the real healing begins. Not in fixing him, in coming home to yourself. So what do you do with all of this now? You start by giving yourself permission to grieve what you didn't get. Not just the breakup, but the connection you were hoping for the whole time. The version of him you kept believing was possible. That grief is real, and it deserves space, not judgment. Then you start rebuilding your relationship with your own presence. For so long, your attention was fixed outward, monitoring him, reading him, adjusting to him. Now it's time to turn that same attentiveness toward yourself. Notice what you feel without immediately explaining it away. Sit with your own emotions the way you always wished you would sit with them. You also start to recognize the pattern, so it doesn't quietly repeat itself. Emotional distance can be disguised as mystery, as independence, as someone being busy or complicated. It's easy to romanticize distance when you've spent years starving for closeness. Learning to notice presence, real presence, is a skill you're allowed to build slowly. And here is the truth you need to hear today. You are not someone who asks for too much. You were someone who was met by someone who had too little to give. Those are two completely different things. And only one of them was ever about you. The silence you kept hearing wasn't proof that something was wrong with you. It was information. It was your own intuition trying to tell you the truth long before your heart was ready to accept it. You don't have to carry guilt for finally listening to it. You are allowed to want a love that shows up, a love that stays present in the hard conversations, not just the easy ones, a love that doesn't require you to shrink, translate, or beg to be understood. That kind of love exists, and you are not asking for too much by wanting it. Healing from this isn't about becoming guarded or expecting less. It's about learning the difference between someone who is quiet because they're processing and someone who is absent because they simply never learned how to stay. You are learning that difference now, and that awareness alone is proof that you are already healing. You were never too much. You just never had the capacity to be enough. And from here, you get to build a life, and eventually a love, where your presence is finally met with presence in return. If this spoke to something you've been carrying, this channel is a space for exactly that kind of healing. Subscribe, and let's keep walking through this together, one quiet truth at a time.